I still remember standing in my living room on the morning of my wedding day, running my fingers along the windowsill that I had painted myself 3 years ago. Every corner of this apartment held a memory of my hard work. The kitchen counter where I had cried when I finally made my last mortgage payment. The bedroom wall I had repainted 4 times until I got the colour exactly right. The small balcony where I used to sit with my morning coffee, feeling proud that I owned something that was completely mine. My mother walked up behind me and put her hand on my shoulder. "You're thinking about it again, aren't you?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Mom, am I doing the right thing? Not telling Thomas that this place is mine?" She squeezed my shoulder gently. "Diana, I raised you to be smart. I worked 3 jobs to make sure you could go to college. I taught you that a woman should always have something of her own, something nobody can take away. You've met Margaret. You've seen how she is. Trust your instincts." I had met Margaret plenty of times during our engagement. She was always sweet to my face, but there was something in her eyes that made me uncomfortable. The way she touched Thomas's arm and called him my baby boy, even though he was 30 years old. The way she asked questions about my salary, my savings, where we would live. Too many questions. Questions that felt less like a future mother-in-law getting to know me and more like someone gathering information. When Thomas and I started dating, I lived in this apartment but never invited him over. I always went to his place or we met at restaurants. When he proposed, I knew we would need to live somewhere after the wedding. That's when I told him I had found us a perfect apartment to rent. The lie came out so easily that it scared me a little. "It's in a great neighborhood," I had told him. 2 bedrooms, nice kitchen, affordable rent. My friend's cousin is the landlord, and he's giving us a good deal. Thomas had been so happy. He hugged me and said, "You're so good at finding solutions, Diana. This is perfect. We can save money while we look for a place to buy in a few years." I had smiled and said nothing about the fact that we were already standing in a place that was bought and paid for. By me. With money I had saved from 5 years of teaching, living in a tiny shared room, eating simple meals, and working weekend tutoring jobs. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. Margaret cried dramatically and kept telling everyone how her precious son was finally settling down. She wore white to my wedding. White. My mother raised her eyebrows when she saw it, but said nothing. That was Margaret's way. Always pushing boundaries, always making everything about her. At the reception, Margaret pulled me aside. She held both my hands and smiled that sweet smile that never reached her eyes. "Diana, dear, I want you to know that I'm here to help you. Marriage is hard, especially for young girls who don't know how to properly take care of a home. I'll be visiting often to teach you things. Thomas deserves the best, and I'm going to make sure he gets it." Something cold settled in my stomach, but I smiled back. "Thank you, Margaret. That's very kind." That night, Thomas and I came home to the apartment as husband and wife. He looked around and said, "You know this place is really nice. Better than I expected for a rental. We're lucky to have it." I made us tea while he unpacked some of his things. My things were already here, of course, but he didn't notice. He was too busy talking about our future. "In a few years, when I get promoted, we'll have enough for a down payment on a real place," he said, pulling me close. "Maybe a house with a yard. My mum says she knows some good neighborhoods we should look at. She's really good with real estate stuff." There it was again. "My mum says." I heard it so often during our engagement, but I had hoped it would get better after the wedding. I had hoped that becoming his wife would mean I came first. But as I looked at Thomas scrolling through text messages from Margaret, already 4 messages since we left the reception 2 hours ago, I felt that cold feeling grow stronger. My phone buzzed. It was Margaret. "Just calling to say goodnight to my son. Also, I'll come by tomorrow to see the apartment. I want to help you arrange the furniture properly. See you at 10. Thomas saw my face and asked, "What's wrong?" "Your mother is coming tomorrow at 10, I said carefully. "That's great." She has such good taste. This place could use her touch. I said nothing. I just looked around at my apartment, the home I had built with my own money, my own choices, my own dreams. And I knew, deep in my heart, that I had made the right decision to keep my secret. I just didn't know yet how right I was. The first 2 weeks of marriage felt like a dream that was slowly turning into something else. Thomas was sweet and loving when we were alone, but every single day, Margaret called at least 5 times, sometimes more. She wanted to know what we ate for breakfast, what time Thomas left for work, when he would be home, what I was cooking for dinner. "Mom just worries," Thomas would say whenever I tried to bring it up. "She's been alone since Dad died. We're all she has." I understood that. I really did. But understanding something doesn't make it easier to live with. Then came the announcement that changed everything. We were having Sunday lunch at Margaret's big house across town. She had cooked enough food for 10 people even though it was just the 3 of us. The whole meal. She kept touching Thomas's hand, fixing his collar, wiping invisible crumbs from his shirt like he was 5 years old instead of 30. "I have wonderful news," she said, setting down her fork with a big smile. "I've decided to sell this house." Thomas looked surprised. "What? Mom, you love this house. You've lived here for 25 years. "It's too big for me now," Margaret said, waving her hand around. "All these empty rooms, all these stairs. And besides, I want to be closer to my son, to both of you. So I've been looking at apartments, and guess what? There's a beautiful unit for sale in your building. 1 floor right below you." My teacup froze halfway to my lips. "No, no, no, no." Thomas lit up like a child on his birthday. "Mom, that's amazing. Having you in the same building would be perfect." "I thought so too," Margaret said, looking directly at me with those cold eyes behind her sweet smile. "I can help Diana with cooking and cleaning. I can teach her how to take proper care of you, and we can see each other every single day." Every single day. The words echoed in my head like a warning bell. That's very generous," I managed to say. My throat felt tight. "Isn't it wonderful, Diana?" Thomas grabbed my hand, squeezing it excitedly. He couldn't see what I saw. He couldn't feel what I felt. "We'll practically be one big family again." Margaret sold her house in 3 weeks. I watched from my bedroom window as the moving truck arrived at our building on a Tuesday morning. Box after box after box. So many things. Where was she going to put all those things in an apartment? I found out soon enough. "Darling, I need your key," Thomas said casually that evening while we were watching television. "What key?" "To our apartment. I want to give Mom a copy, so she doesn't have to knock every time she visits. She's right downstairs now. It just makes sense." Everything in me screamed to say no. But how could I? How could I explain without sounding like a terrible daughter-in-law? Without making Thomas choose between his mother and his wife? So I handed over my key to my own apartment. And I watched Thomas make a copy for Margaret the next day. The visits started immediately. Margaret came up the first morning at 7 o'clock. I was still in my pajamas, barely awake, when I heard the key turning in the lock. "Good morning," she sang out, walking straight into my kitchen like she owned it. "I brought fresh bread. Thomas needs a proper breakfast before work. You're still in your nightclothes." "Goodness, dear, a wife should always be dressed and ready before her husband wakes up." Thomas came out of the bedroom, smiling. "Morning, Mum. You didn't have to do this." Nonsense. A mother never stops taking care of her son. That was day 1. By day 3, Margaret had rearranged my kitchen cabinets. "Much more efficient this way," she said when I came home from work to find everything in different places. I couldn't find my own coffee mugs. By the end of the first week, she had brought up her own set of curtains. "These are much better quality than what you have. Trust me, I know fabrics." She replaced my curtains, the ones I had carefully chosen and hung myself, with heavy, dark drapes that made the living room feel like her old house. By the second week, she was coming up 3 times a day. Morning, afternoon, evening. She had opinions about everything. The way I folded laundry, the way I cooked rice, the pictures I had hung on the walls. "This photograph is crooked," she would say, adjusting it. "This plant needs more water. This rug doesn't match. When are you going to learn how to properly season meat?" I tried talking to Thomas one night after Margaret had left. We were getting ready for bed, and I was exhausted from a long day of teaching, and then coming home to find Margaret cooking in my kitchen. Again. "Thomas, I love that your mother wants to help, but maybe she could visit a bit less. Like maybe just a few times a week instead of every day. His face changed. It got hard in a way I hadn't seen before. Diana? She just moved here to be close to us. She sold her house. Are you really going to make her feel unwelcome? I'm not saying unwelcome. She's doing all these nice things for us. And you're complaining? Do you know how lucky you are? Most wives would be grateful to have a mother-in-law who actually wants to help. I stared at him. This wasn't the man I thought I married. Fine, I whispered. Forget I said anything, but I didn't forget. And neither did Margaret. The next day, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. I opened my apartment door quietly, not wanting to disturb anything. That's when I heard Margaret's voice coming from my bedroom. She was on the phone with someone. The rental isn't bad, but it's small, and the furniture is so cheap. I'm slowly replacing things with better pieces from my house. She doesn't seem to notice, which tells you everything about her taste. I stood frozen in my own hallway, listening to my mother-in-law talk about my home, my furniture, my choices, like they were nothing, like I was nothing. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Margaret's voice saying those words. Cheap furniture. She doesn't seem to notice. The worst part was that Thomas was sleeping peacefully next to me, completely unaware that his mother was slowly erasing me from my own home. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face my students while feeling like this. After Thomas left for his job, I sat on my couch, the couch I had saved for months to buy, the one Margaret called cheap, and tried to figure out what to do. My phone rang. It was my mother. Diana, you sound tired. What's wrong? I told her everything. The daily visits, the rearranging, the replacement of my things, Thomas's refusal to see any problem. When I finished, there was a long silence. Baby girl, my mother finally said, you need to be very careful. Women like Margaret don't stop. They take and take until there's nothing left of you. But you have something she doesn't know about. Use it wisely when the time comes. That afternoon, Margaret let herself in at 2 o'clock. She was carrying shopping bags. Diana, you're home. Are you sick? She didn't wait for an answer. Well, good. You can help me. I bought new throw pillows for the living room and some nice picture frames for the hallway. I watched her unpack her purchases. Everything was in shades of cream and gold, the exact colours from her old house. Nothing like the blues and greens I had chosen for my apartment. Margaret, I said carefully, I appreciate all this, but I actually liked the pillows we had. She looked at me with surprise, like a dog who had just learned to talk. Oh, sweetie, those were practically falling apart. These are much better quality. You'll see. They weren't falling apart. I bought them last year. Well, they looked old. She smiled and continued unpacking. Subject closed. That evening, Thomas came home to find the living room transformed again. He loved it. Mum has such an eye for design, he said, kissing my cheek. Doesn't it look better? I said nothing. What was the point? 3 months passed like this. Slowly, steadily, Margaret was replacing everything in my apartment with her things. My colourful kitchen towels became her plain white ones. My artwork came down, replaced by her landscape paintings. My cosy reading lamp disappeared, replaced by her formal chandelier. I felt like I was disappearing. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Thursday evening. I had stayed late at school for a parent-teacher meeting. I got home around 7, tired and hungry. As I walked down the hallway toward my apartment, I heard voices inside, loud voices. I put my key in the lock quietly and opened the door. Thomas and Margaret were in the living room. They didn't hear me come in because they were talking so intensely. But Mum, Diana has been talking about maybe buying our own place someday, Thomas was saying. Margaret's laugh was cold and sharp, nothing like the sweet voice she used around me. Buy a place? With what money, Thomas? Be realistic. Your salary goes to bills and helping me with my expenses. And her little teacher salary? She laughed again. That's barely enough for groceries. Teachers don't make real money. My hand tightened on my purse. My little teacher salary had bought this entire apartment. Besides, Margaret continued, I've been thinking about your future. I'm renovating my old house, the one I sold. Well, actually, I didn't sell it. I'm having it fixed up. In 6 months, when this rental lease is up, you two will move there with me. It's a proper house, not this tiny apartment. Diana can quit that exhausting job and focus on being a proper wife. Maybe start thinking about giving me grandchildren. I stopped breathing. She still owned her old house? She had lied about selling it? I don't know, Mom, Thomas said, but his voice was uncertain. Diana really loves teaching, and she's been saying she wants to keep working even if we have kids someday. Thomas! Margaret's voice became firm, the voice of a mother correcting a child. Diana doesn't know what she wants. She's young and doesn't understand how marriage works. Trust me, a woman's place is at home, taking care of her husband and children. Your father and I had a perfect marriage because I knew my role. Diana needs to learn hers. What about what Diana wants? Thomas asked, but his voice was so weak, so unsure. What Diana wants? Margaret sounded genuinely confused. Thomas, you're the man, the husband. You make the decisions. I raised you better than to let a wife tell you what to do. Look at this place. She picked it. And it's tiny and cramped. She chose that awful furniture that I've been slowly replacing. She doesn't have good judgment. That's why she needs us to guide her. But she seems happy with her choices. She seems happy because she doesn't know any better. When you move into my house, I'll teach her properly. How to cook the way you like. How to keep house. How to dress appropriately. Right now, she's still wearing those colourful scarves and bright clothes like a teenager. A married woman should look elegant, sophisticated. Like me. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but they were tears of anger, not sadness. Every word was like a slap. Every sentence revealed how little this woman thought of me. Thomas sighed. You really think moving to your house is the best idea? I know it is. And son, between you and me, the sooner we get her out of that school, the better. Those teacher friends of hers keep filling her head with modern ideas about women's independence and careers. It's not healthy for a marriage. That's when I dropped my purse. The thud echoed through the apartment. Both of them froze and turned toward the doorway where I stood. Thomas's face went pale. Margaret's expression shifted from shock to calculation in 1 second. Diana! Thomas jumped up from the couch. When did you get home? Apparently just in time, I said quietly. Margaret recovered first. She always did. That sweet smile spread across her face like oil on water. Diana, darling, we were just talking about future plans. Nothing definite, just dreaming about possibilities. She walked toward me with her arms out like she wanted to hug me. I stepped back. Don't. The smile faltered for just a second. Now, Diana, I know you're tired from work. Why don't you go rest and I'll make you some nice tea? Stop, I said, my voice stronger now. Just stop, Margaret. I heard everything. Every single word. Thomas moved toward me too. Diana, let me explain. Your mum was just making plans for my entire life without asking me. Plans to make me quit my job. Plans to move us into her house. Plans to control everything I do, everything I wear, everything I am. My voice was shaking, but I kept going. And you were just listening, barely even questioning her. That's not fair, Thomas said, his face reddening. I was asking her about what you wanted. You were asking her. You should have been telling her what we want, what our marriage needs, not what she thinks is best. Margaret's sweet mask was cracking now. Thomas, you see, this is exactly what I was talking about, this modern disrespect. When I was a young wife, when you were a young wife, you made your choices, I said, turning to her. And that's fine. But you don't get to make mine. This is my marriage, not yours. My son's marriage is my business, Margaret said. And now the sweetness was completely gone. Her voice was ice. I raised him. I sacrificed everything for him. I have every right to make sure he's happy and well cared for. Then why don't you trust him to choose his own wife? To make his own decisions? Margaret's eyes narrowed. Because clearly he doesn't always choose well. The words hung in the air like poison. Thomas looked shocked. Mum, that's too far. Is it? Margaret crossed her arms. Look at this place, Thomas. Look at what she chose for you. A cramped rental in a mediocre building, cheap furniture, no taste, no class. Is this the life you deserve? Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was hearing her insult my home one more time. My home that I owned, that I had worked so hard for, that she had been slowly trying to erase and replace. You want to talk about this place? I said quietly. Let's talk about it. I walked to my bedroom, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. Behind me, I heard Margaret say to Thomas, "See? She's being dramatic, emotional. This is why women need guidance." I grabbed the folder from my nightstand drawer, the folder I had looked at 1,000 times over the past 3 months, wondering when the right moment would come, wondering if I was wrong to keep this secret. I wasn't wrong. This was exactly the right moment. When I walked back into the living room, they were both standing there. Thomas looked confused and worried. Margaret looked annoyed, like I was a child having a tantrum. I threw the folder onto the coffee table, Margaret's coffee table that she had brought up to replace mine 2 weeks ago. Papers spilled out across the surface. "What is this?" Thomas picked up one of the papers, frowning. "Read it," I said. He read. His frown deepened. He picked up another paper, then another. His face went from confused to shocked to completely white. These are property documents," he said slowly. "For this apartment. Yes. With your name on them. Yes." Margaret snatched a paper from his hand. "What? No, this must be a mistake. This is a rental," Diana said. "Diana lied," I said, and my voice was steady now. Strong. "This apartment isn't a rental. I own it. I bought it 3 years ago, 2 years before Thomas and I even met. I paid cash with money I saved from my little teacher salary. The one you think is so worthless." The silence was so complete, I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. Thomas kept shuffling through the papers. Mortgage statements, all paid off. Property tax receipts in my name, the title deed, everything official, everything real, everything mine. You own this?" he whispered. "Every single inch of it." Margaret's face had gone from pale to red. "You lied to us. You let us believe. I let you believe exactly what you wanted to believe." I cut her off. That I was some poor, helpless girl who needed to be saved and taught and controlled. That I didn't know how to make good choices. That my furniture was cheap. That my taste was bad. That my salary was nothing. I walked to the wall where Margaret had hung one of her landscape paintings last week. I took it down and leaned it against the wall. "Every single thing you've replaced in this apartment. It was mine. Everything you called cheap and tasteless, I bought it. I chose it. I loved it. Diana," Thomas started, but I held up my hand. "And this morning," I continued, my voice getting stronger with every word, "while you two were planning my future, planning to move me into Margaret's house and make me quit my job and turn me into some version of a perfect wife that only exists in her head, you want to know what I was doing?" They both stared at me. I was teaching 25 students how to read, how to think, how to dream, with my little worthless teacher salary that bought this entire apartment. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No words came out. Thomas dropped the papers back onto the table. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Because I wanted to see," I said. "I wanted to see who you really were, who she really was, what you both really thought of me." I looked at them both. "And now I know." Margaret finally found her voice. This is a trap. You trapped my son. You lied to trick him into marrying you for..." "For what?" I shouted, and they both jumped. "For my apartment? Margaret, you have a whole house. Thomas has a good job. What exactly did I trap him for? Love? Partnership? A future together?" Margaret's face twisted into something ugly. All the sweetness was completely gone now. "You lied to trap him into feeling like he was the provider, like he was the man. And all along, you were secretly lording this over him." I wasn't lording anything over anyone. My hands were shaking. I was protecting myself, and thank God I did, because everything I was afraid of came true. "You moved into this building. You took over my home. You replaced my things. You made plans for my entire life without asking me. You talked about me like I was nothing. Like I was just some silly girl who needed to be fixed and controlled. Thomas finally spoke, and his voice was strange, flat. You didn't trust me. I turned to him. Would you have told your mother? If I had told you this apartment was mine, would you have kept it from her? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew the truth. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Thomas, every decision we've made since we got married, your mother was part of it. Every single one. I couldn't even choose what curtains to have in my own home without her changing them. She was just trying to help. She was trying to control everything. I pointed at the papers on the table. She lied to you too, Thomas. She didn't sell her house. She still owns it. She was planning to move us there in 6 months and make me quit my job. Were you going to let that happen? Thomas looked at his mother. Mum, is that true? You still have the house? Margaret lifted her chin defiantly. I kept it as an investment. And yes, I think it would be better for everyone if you lived there. This place is too small for a family. What about when you have children? Where will they sleep? That's our decision, I said. Mine and Thomas's, not yours. Everything about my son is my business, Margaret said coldly. I raised him alone after his father died. I sacrificed my entire life for him. I gave up everything. And then you came along with your secrets and your lies. My lies! I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've been lying since the day you moved here. You act sweet to my face and then tear me apart behind my back. You throw away my things and replace them with yours. You walk into my home whenever you want because Thomas gave you a key without asking me. You treat this place like it's yours. Well, guess what? It's not. It's mine. Diana, please, Thomas said, and he looked genuinely distressed now. Can we all just calm down and talk about this rationally? Rationally? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Thomas, there's nothing rational about this situation. Your mother has been taking over our lives for 3 months, and you haven't stopped her once. Not once. Every time I tried to talk to you about it, you told me I was being ungrateful. You made me feel crazy for wanting boundaries in my own home. Because I thought. He stopped, ran his hands through his hair. I thought you were just adjusting to married life. Mum said it was normal for wives to be sensitive at first. Mum said. I repeated. That's the problem right there, Mum said. Mum thinks. Mum wants. What about what I say? What I think? What I want? Margaret stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this disrespect. Thomas, get your things. You're coming to stay with me tonight. Let your wife cool down and think about what she's done. What I've done? I stared at her. I worked 3 jobs to buy this place. I saved every penny. I built a life for myself. And then I fell in love and got married and let my husband move into my home without telling him it was mine because I wanted us to build something together, as equals. But you couldn't let that happen, could you? You had to make sure I knew my place. Your place is supporting my son, Margaret said. Not keeping secrets from him. Not owning things without telling him. A marriage is supposed to be a partnership. You're right, I said. It is supposed to be a partnership. Between 2 people. Not 3. Thomas looked between us, his face torn. I don't. I need to think. Think about what? I asked him. Think about whether your wife deserves to be respected in her own home. Think about whether your mother should get to make decisions about our marriage. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Tears were finally coming now, hot and angry. Thomas, I love you. I married you because I love you. But I can't live like this. I can't live in my own apartment and feel like a guest. I can't have every choice I make criticized and replaced. I can't plan a future with someone who won't stand up for me. Margaret grabbed her purse. Thomas, are you coming or not? This was it. The moment. I watched my husband stand there, looking at his mother, then at me, then at the papers scattered on the table, proving that everything he thought he knew about our home was a lie. I need time, he finally said. I need to think about all of this. Fine, Margaret said triumphantly. Let's go. No, Thomas said, and both Margaret and I looked at him in surprise. No, Mum, you go. I'm staying here. I need to talk to my wife. Alone. Margaret's face went red, then white. Thomas, please, Mum, just go. I'll call you tomorrow. For the first time since I'd known her, Margaret had no words. She looked at her son like he'd just stabbed her in the heart. Then she looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, she said quietly. Then she turned and walked out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her so hard that one of her precious picture frames fell off the wall and shattered. Thomas and I stood in the silence, surrounded by the proof of my secret and the wreckage of his mother's departure. So, he finally said, this is really your apartment? Yes, and you've owned it the whole time. Yes. He sat down heavily on the couch. I don't know how to feel right now. I sat down too, but on the opposite end. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. But Thomas, I'm not sorry I protected myself, because everything I was afraid might happen, did happen. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, she went too far. I see that now. The things she said about you, about your job, about controlling your life, that was wrong. It was more than wrong, I said. It was cruel. And you didn't stop her. I know. He looked at me, and his eyes were red. I didn't want to see it. She's my mum. She's all I had after Dad died. I thought she was just being helpful, being involved. I didn't realize she was. He trailed off. Taking over, I finished. Erasing me. Trying to turn me into whatever version of a wife exists in her head. I failed you, Thomas said quietly. As a husband, I failed you. I didn't disagree. We sat there as the sun set outside the window, in the apartment I had bought with my own hard work, wondering if a marriage could survive this kind of truth. Finally, I said, the question is, what happens now? Thomas looked around at the apartment, really looked at it, maybe for the first time, at the walls I had painted, the floors I had chosen, the home I had built. Now, he said slowly, I think we need to talk about what our marriage looks like. Not my mother's version, ours. It wasn't a perfect answer. It wasn't even a complete answer. But it was a start. And outside, one floor below, I knew Margaret was planning her next move, because women like her never gave up that easily. But now she knew the truth. This was my home, my apartment, my life, and I wasn't going anywhere.